the kinetic energy of two bodies became equal, and the mass of the second body is double the mass of the first. If the speed of the first is v, then what is the speed of the second? Okay, no numbers here are given, but we know what they are talking about. Okay, if we go step by step on this question, what we're gonna see? The kinetic energy of two bodies became equal. That means the question is talking about two bodies. And these two bodies, for example, now we are going to talk about, for example, body number A1 and number what? And number 2. And number 2. So object number 1 and object number 2. So we have two objects or two bodies. And they said now the kinetic energy of these two bodies is equal. So that means now the kinetic energy which is half times the mass of the first object times the velocity of the first object as well, of the first object squared, equals the kinetic energy of the second one now, which is half times m2 times velocity of the second square. So that means now, since they said kinetic energy of the first object equals the kinetic energy of what? Of the second. So just we substitute the formula of each one, we're gonna find what? Kinetic energy of the first here, of the first object, it equals to the also the velocity of the second. Now just we simplify. If we multiply by 2 both sides, this half will go by this half. So what is left with us is mass of object number 1 or body number 1 times its velocity squared equals mass number 2 times velocity of object 2 what? Squared. Now we continue reading here. Then they said here is equal, then they said the mass of the second body is double the mass of the first. How can I transform this text into numbers or into equations? Mass of the second, they are talking about m2 equals to double. That means equals twice of what? Twice mass number 1. That means m2 equals twice the mass of object number 1. So what I'm going to do now, this one now is the value of m2. So we're going to put it now instead of what? Instead of m2 here. Then I'll get m1 v1 squared equals 2m1 v2 squared. Now, as we see now, m1 here, if I divide both sides, m1 will go by m1. What is left now? v1 squared equals 2v2 squared. Okay, now I continue reading here now. When I continue reading, what will I find? I'll find if the speed of the first is v. Okay, the speed of the first here, which is the velocity, is v. So instead of v1, I'm gonna write it as just what? V. So that means I'm gonna write it now. I'm gonna write it like only v squared equals what? 2v2 squared. Now, I continue reading here. What they are asking then, what is the speed of the second? The speed of the second, that is the velocity of the second here. What is it? So they are asking about v2. They are asking about what? v2. So in this case now, to isolate v2, I'm going to divide both sides by 2. So I divide here by 2 and I divide here by 2. So 2 will go by 2. What will I get then? What will I get then here? I'll get that on the left side, it's v2 over 2 equals v2 squared. Now I take the square root of both sides. When I take the square root of this side here, and when I take the square root of the left side has a fraction. And you take the square root of the fraction, you take the fraction of the denominator, and you take the square root of the denominator, and you take the square root of the denominator. So square root of v2 is gonna be v2 squared is v2, and square root of v squared is v, and square root of 2 will remain there, v2. So that means, as you see now, this is the final answer, which is v2, it equals v over radical 2. Then you go to choose here v over radical 2 as the answer.